If your push-ups are feeling kind of limited or restricted, or it just feels like you can't quite keep a strong false grip when you're doing any pulling movements, it could be that there's some wrist restrictions either at the joint or the soft tissue. So in order to find this out, we are going to simply just look at your active range of motion. So we'll look at wrist extension, and we want to see about 80 to 90 degrees. And we really shouldn't feel any pinchiness or excessive stretch. Now, in my right one, I feel a little extra stretch, and it's coming all the way up into my elbow, and there's a little bit limited range. If I overpress that, it still feels like stretch. Now, when I go into flexion, again, we want to see about 80 to 90 degrees of flexion, and you see my left one's a little bit more restricted. Now, if I overpress that, I feel it more as a joint restriction. So if we feel a pinch in the joint, most likely joint problems, and if we feel a stretch, most likely muscle. So we're going to go after both corrections for the joint and the tissue. Going after soft tissue restrictions, we're just going to use simply a lacrosse ball here, and we're just going to go roaming around looking for those speed bumps or those trigger points. And when we find something, I can feel something right there, we're going to pin it, and then we're going to stretch on top of that. So we're doing some fascial flossing here. I can do this both actively, or I can do it a little passively, and then I can also extend, or I can just kind of strip that tissue out to see if we can gain a little bit of extra range at the joint. Now, if it's a joint restriction, we're going to use a band to help mobilize the joint. So we saw that my left wrist had limited wrist flexion. So we're going to put a band just at the wrist joint here, and I'm going to load into that. So I am flattening the back of that wrist, and you can see I can't quite get that elbow straight. And I'm going to make a fist, and I'm going to roll up onto it. So simply, we're just mobilizing, I'm gliding the radius and the ulna backwards to create some space in the back of my wrist here. And by adding some strength and resistance, it's going to be a controlled movement as we move through this, so it's not just passive. Then afterwards, we want to check our range of motion and see if there's any changes, see if it feels different. So that one feels a little bit different, as does that one. Once we have this new range, we want to lock it in with some strength and control. So we're going to do a pressing sequence for the wrists and the hands here, and we're going to use our own body weight as resistance. So we're going to start with our fingers turned in, and I'm going to lean into that. I'm going to press side to side here. So my hands aren't passive with this. I'm literally gripping into the ground here to make it an active stretch and strength at the same time. Now, once I feel that new range, I'm going to pick them up. I'm going to spin them around all the way to full external rotation, and I'm going to press them again. So this is changing the tissue tension in the arms and the fascial lines. Now, once I've got a good grasp of that, I'm going to pick them back up again to see if I can hold that new range. And now I'm going to curl them under, and then I'm going to press the backs of the wrists. So we're in that full internal rotation, kind of false grip. The hands and fists are very active. I'm going to press into those a few times. Then I'm going to pick them up, and I'm going to spin them around to the backs of the wrist with full external rotation. So be very careful, be very gentle with this if you're not used to pressing onto the backs of the wrists. And from here, I can also do some wrist levers. Okay, I can spin it back around. I can do some finger levers here, spin them back, and here. So we can always add some kind of strength and control with each position of the shoulders as well as the hands. Now, of course, go back and check your work. And if it feels different and if it moves different, great. But what you want to do is go back and check those functional movements, either with your push-ups or your rows, and see if you can maintain and lock that in. If it's a true structural problem, it's going to take some time. So it's not going to be an immediate effect, but it will feel a little bit different. But you're going to need to do some repetitions over time. If it's more of a neurological issue, then you're going to see a quick immediate change, and that range of motion usually holds still. If you found this information helpful, you can head over to amtcertified.com. There's lots of free information over there and links to my YouTube channel, as well as you can learn to integrate this into your practice using active, passive movement assessments, and then learning how to lock in strength and control with that.